Hello, amazing people. It's time for another Hotlap. Buckle up, get your helmet, and let's go for a ride. This week we're going to dive into the worlds of Formula One and NASCAR as we break down the NASCAR races that took place in Phoenix and Bristol in the past week, as well as the season so far and tech talk about Formula One. Without further ado, let's get straight into the NASCAR. Alright, NASCAR Race 1 took place late last week, but I didn't get a chance to do it in that episode, so we're going to go over it in this one. The NASCAR race that took place in Phoenix, Arizona. We have Christopher Bell taking his first win of the season after winning half a dozen races and even advancing into the Championship 4 in the previous 2 seasons of the NASCAR Cup Car Series. Bell won Stage 2, overcame a pit road issue to return to the front, and then rallied from 20th to the lead after he was among his team in the pit for the final time on lap 218 of 312 during what turned out to be the race's final caution. Some teams had stopped before Bell. Several stayed out hoping for another caution. When those who stayed out eventually were forced to pit for fuel, Bell, who had smartly taken 4 new tires on his final stop, emerged with a comfortable lead and then victory over Chris Buescher. The start of the 2024 NASCAR Cup season has been a difficult one for Mr. Buescher, who was one of the top performing drivers at the end of the previous NASCAR Cup Car season. This season just not going the way that he thinks it should be for him, even though we've seen him come up in multiple of the top 10s as we've been naming them throughout the past 4 weeks of racing. Buescher said in his interview after the race, "That's huge. We've been able to lead races at any point in all 3 races leading up to this. We didn't quite get there today, but certainly a great finish. Really proud of everybody." This is a good try. We had a rough go last week. This was good to get everybody back to prove that we're in this together and we're going to win one of these things as a team. That was almost a win today. Good view, good positivity from Buescher. Obviously, bringing up your team is something that they want to see in the media, something that your team tells you to do in the media. It's just good to see that he is ready for the teamwork, then willing to put in kind of the work to give the team what he needs and what he thinks he deserves personally. The Toyota team win could just be the momentum change that Toyota needed, and as well as Joe Gibbs' racing team specifically to compete high up the field this season. This is the first Toyota that we see take a win this season. It's good momentum. It's good to keep them going. They've been kind of up the field a little bit competitive, but getting them to the top step on the podium was a very, very important step for them to take forwards. Our top 10 for the NASCAR event, we have Bell, Buescher, Gibbs, Keselowski, Blaney, Chastain, Truex Jr., McDowell, Briscoe, and Reddick. Again, our top 10s were Bell, Buescher, Gibbs, Keselowski, Blaney, Chastain, Truex Jr., McDowell, Briscoe, and Reddick. Pretty solid weekend. Nothing too eventful happened at the Phoenix race. Just the same cautions that you see week in and week out. A little bit of pit trouble for Christopher Bell. Ended up not mattering too much. He did end up taking the victory in that one. The Bristol race, however, was a very confusing race, to be honest with you. Hamlin, who won last fall's Bristol night race, found himself in a much different scenario in Sunday's race, which was the first spring Bristol event that was held on the asphalt since 2020. The race has been run on dirt for the past 3 years, which I found kind of interesting. Like, you don't think of NASCAR, especially the Cup Car Series, as being run on dirt. You know, like, at least I didn't. I'm just now starting to learn a little bit more about NASCAR. I didn't realize that they ever raced on dirt. I know that they're incorporating street circuits this year, but I did not know the dirt races were a thing. Hamlin's number 11 Joe Gibbs racing team proved to adapt best as he led 13 times for a race high of 163 of the 500 laps that took place around the Bristol circuit. Kyle Larson, we talked about being positive with your team and how it's important to kind of leave that note that like, hey, I'm here, I'm fighting for the team, this is good, this is bad. As a team, we did good. Kyle Larson did not have that mentality. He was not happy with his weekend in Bristol, preferring to never run a race like that ever again. I think it was all accidental, Larson said. I don't really know what happened. A bit confusing on how that all played out and happened, but happy we were able to make it live in the end. Larson did end up finishing in the top 10, finishing 5th place. Again, we see the confusion about how he wasn't exactly sure about how his strategy and everything played out, so that he ended up being in the top 10. However, while making a pit stop on what turned out to be the final caution of the race, Larson was penalized for equipment interference and had to restart the race from the back of the field. Again, makes it even more impressive that he was able to move up the field. As it turned out, the race remained green the rest of the way, and everyone, including Larson, had to make a green flag pit stop for new tires before the race was finished, and he was one of the first to do so, which eventually led to the benefit and how it kind of pushed him up the field as others' tires were falling off. He had fresh, and they were able to stay fresh till the end of the race, more or less. Although Goodyear brought the same tire combination as was used in last September's race at the track, it became clear early in the race that the tire fall-off was laying no rubber on the track, which resulted in unusually excessive tire wear. I find that to be, very confusing, how I described the race earlier. As they're racing around, you should be able to kind of tell that rubber's getting laid down from the tires, and maybe those tires will fall off during practice sessions or hot laps or during qualifying, but by the time the track is rubbered in, or should be rubbered in, all the drivers should have enough grip and the tire should be lasting a lot longer. Didn't see that in Bristol. We were trying to understand what's different, why the track is behaving differently than a year ago. Goodyear Racing Director Greg Stucker said during an appearance in the infield media center late in the race. It's the same package, it's the same tire combination, it's still a bit unknown. However, a visual examination of the track surface after the race showed no areas of rubbering in on the concrete surface. So there was no rubber being laid down by any of the tires that ran over the track. The race showed no area of rubbering in on the concrete surface, on the area covered by resin or off. In fact, other than the marbles of used tires that were falling off, it was hard to discern a race had ever taken place on the track at all. That is, it's a little mind-blowing, just knowing kind of how tires work and how that grip would translate onto the track and how it just didn't happen. Can be very off-putting, but also make for a very exciting race. At the end of the Bristol race, we have our top 10. They are Hamlin, Truex Jr., Keselowski, Bowman, Larson, Nemechek, Buescher, Elliott, Gibbs, and Bell. I personally, following NASCAR a little bit now, have noticed some of the same names popping up. And it's just kind of funny to see how driver's skill comes into NASCAR because it is a stock car series. You don't see very often in stock car series the same names coming up in the top 10. Just proves that there's some really, really good competition and very adept drivers. Just a personal thought. We're going to go ahead and move into Formula One right now. All right, we got some Formula One thoughts, some season analysis so far, if you will. My first note I have is Max Verstappen, World Drivers Champion in the championship for 2024. I think that these first two races were very, very, very telling about how good Red Bull truly are. Max Verstappen, obviously, leagues above everybody else, finishing basically 2 race distances before anybody else can get through a singular race distance. I think it's fairly simple to see that Verstappen will be the World Drive Championship in 2024, unless we see Red Ball. Well, we're not going to see Red Ball unless we see Red Bull's future fall apart. The future in heavy jeopardy, of course, due to Christian Horner, Helmut Marko, and Max Verstappen all acting up around the energy drink company racing team. Horner, of course, with his case that he's got going on. Marko, we discussed last week, and Marko is having lasting effects on Max Verstappen. So will we see Max stay? Will he go? If he goes, where is he going? Where's Helmut going? What's happening with Christian Horner? All these need to be answered in order to truly tell who will be World Driver Championship. Wow, who will be the World Driver Champion in 2024? Sergio Perez, starting well. Very similar to the start that he had last season. Of course, we saw a very heavy fall off through the midseason, and then he kind of picked it up at the end a little bit. Hopefully we can see him keep momentum all the way through this year, keep finishing P2. And I have on here that if he performs similarly to last year, we will probably see him lose his seat for 2025 unless Max Verstappen leaves Red Bull. If Max leaves Red Bull, I think with Lewis Hamilton going to Ferrari replacing Carlos Sainz, we could see Carlos Sainz either back in a Racing Bull or being alongside Sergio Perez in the vacant Red Bull seat. So I think George and Max could be at Mercedes together, Lewis and Charles at Ferrari, and Sainz goes back to Red Bull to race alongside Sergio Perez. I also have a prediction that Alpine will be leaving F1 after they have the horrible start to their season. We see many of their directors and advisors leaving at the start of the season. I think that team is very much falling apart. Williams Haas Racing Bulls is kind of who we're going to see in the midfield this year. We might see a McLaren or an Aston Martin dip down there. Definitely Aston Martin, I think, has a high chance of dipping down there. Stake needs to find a little bit more in their car. They need to bring a very substantial upgrade. If they do end up bringing that upgrade, we will see them fighting in the midfield. I think Red Bull, Ferrari, and Mercedes will be the top 6 for this season very, very consistently unless an anomaly happens. And we will see the Alpines just at the back of the grid all year long. Let's go ahead and move into our new segment. We're going to be doing some tech talk for DRS. All right, quick tech talk for the drag reduction system. It is a controversial driver control device aimed at aiding overtaking and increasing the chance of wheel-to-wheel racing in Formula 1, Formula 2, and all the Formula supporting series respectively. It is the only mechanically moving piece of aerodynamics on a Formula 1 car allowed by the rules and regulations during a race while the car is in motion. Deploying down straights, DRS is used as a way for drivers to further close a gap on a car ahead or make an attempt at overtaking the car ahead. DRS is only allowed to be deployed in designated and predefined DRS zones on a track, likely a long straight, a short straight. There's usually 2 or 3 DRS zones within a track. It is available to all drivers who are within 1 second of the next car ahead of them, and the DRS at the DRS timing line. So for each zone, there's a point picked previous to the zone where as cars are going past, they're getting timed between each other. If that gap is less than a second, the driver has DRS for the DRS zone ahead of them. It is allowed for drivers who are within 1 second of the car ahead of them at that DRS timing line, as well as new this season to Formula 1. It turns on 2 laps following a race start or a race restart. This is different from last year where they had to do 3 laps in order to get their first lap of DRS on track. DRS takes place only at the rear wing of the car for now. We'll see, maybe with regulation changes in 2026, we might see front wing DRS or some other mechanically moving parts that will be allowed to the teams in order to keep the Formula 1 car just a superior series, a superior racing series to all others. When deployed, it opens a flap on the rear wing, reducing air drag and increasing the aerodynamic flow of the car. The tool is generally aimed at assisting overtaking when drivers would otherwise be stuck in dirty and turbulent air. Typically, the FIA estimates that DRS can boost a car's speed by 10 to 12 kilometers, which is 6 to about 7.5 miles per hour when activated. Doesn't sound like a lot, but when it takes you to 350, 330 kph, and the driver in front of you is going 320, that can really be quite the decider on whether or not you catch them or have that chance to overtake down a straight. The maximum slot allowed between the wing when DRS is active by the FIA is 85 millimeters. If a team is found to have more than that, they may face financial or point reduction penalties by the FIA. This was a big deal. I believe there was an investigation by Mercedes on Red Bull, or on Red Bull by Mercedes, in which one of the teams failed in their DRS check when the FIA went to go and look at their car. Can't exactly remember the outcome, but I do believe that it was some sort of penalty to either budget, like a budget cap, or it was to points, like either for the driver or for the team. I can't exactly remember which one it was. I hope you guys enjoyed the segment. I hope you learned something. As always, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and feel free to follow me on my socials linked below. Thank you guys for coming this week. Come back next week as we go over race results and key moments in the motorsports world. Until next time, don't forget to brake late and accelerate early.